Welcome everyone to Web3 Wednesdays with Consensys. I'm very excited to be hosting this again with Clemens. It's our monthly session where Clemens goes through all of the latest AI news and things that we should know about AI, especially as we are part of the Web3 ecosystem. So with that, and hoping that I won't sneeze again before I hand over to you, Clemens, welcome and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Marta. And so glad to be a part of these Web3 Wednesdays. This is a session where I cover kind of the last months of activity. And this has been quite a crazy month, actually crazy past few days because of Dev Day for OpenAI. So I did make some changes, but let's go through kind of what we'll talk about. So first, I'll do a shorter version of the intro. The September and October sessions cover a lot more detail in the intro. I'll tend to just jump through it very quickly, but in case you're just joining in for this one, I'll give enough of a background. I'll go through some of the October to November insights that I found, some trends that I'm looking at, and then I'll go into some GPT version 4 vision, some details and some fun experiments that I've done, as well as doing this fun assignment called writing an AI team charter and seeing how that goes. And we'll do some of it live, but it's actually a meta type of thing to think about. But let's get started. So first, as a background, Consensys and AI, we've been working on this since around April, maybe even May of this year. And we started by creating a company-wide policy. I think that is the most important thing. If you are internally creating your own AI initiative, start off with a policy, talk to your people to make sure that legal and security is on board, that you can, upload your current content to the right resources, maybe build your own Consensys ChatGPT if possible. The first thing we did was create an applied AI Slack channel where it's a decentralized approach. So we talk to people, we share the news, we try to stay updated and try to coordinate. From there, this is part of an AI takeover sprint. So there are training sessions. We give weekly type of prompt suggestions, different types of ways for people to get involved. And I think that was a great idea. It is coming to an end, but I will continue doing these monthly sessions. There was a hackathon where AI was a reward, a particular AI award at the end of it, and that was back in May. And we got access to some of the common tools. So this all required some approval, but internally we were able to access GitHub Copilot, OpenAI, Azure, as well as ChatGPT in some senses if we didn't upload any sensitive information. And now we're at the phase where we have an AI team charter that we'll be talking about later today from William. There is a group within the office of the CTO, and we are building a lot of content that we can share internally and hopefully externally as well. In terms of public facing, the first layer, like with Web3, is with marketing. So obviously you want some internal facing updates, but overall we want to make sure that we're not revealing anything. So most of our work is stateless. We have mostly been creating content, images and other types of code snippets with the tools that we have. And we've been exploring how we can use these plugins for things like snaps and thinking about the impact of GPTs and general creation of this content for a better developer experience. And I think that moving forward, the public facing material is talking more about, as a developer, as kind of a product manager, how do you adjust your strategy based on how we think this new interface is going to play out. For those who want to look at previous recordings, we've been doing Web3 Wednesdays publicly for the past 2 months, and there is a YouTube channel. I will share the link to all this material so you can look through it. But if you're curious, I probably can click through this, copy the link, and share. Feel free to watch this at your own time. Great. So let's jump in. Base expectations. So what is generative AI? It is a foundational model. It is showing itself as a large language model. AI has been around for quite a long time. People have thought about this type of understanding with heuristics and to label things. I think the early days of AI was more supervised learning, meaning you're looking for patterns without kind of defining those dimensions. So if you're looking to build a spam filter, you take your subset of data, label it with yes or no spam, and then the AI algorithm would take that data, build some connections to it, build a neural network for it, and create a filter on top of it. Same for advertising, same for imaging, same for routes, right? These are all optimizations by labeling things properly. And that still exists, right? It's a small set of data. Every company, I think, has some level of training on their data in order to make better decisions. If you're looking at videos on TikTok, there is an algorithm that exists, right? And the AI portion of this is really just making sense of that data and forming some connections. So what's different right now is that there are prompt-based AI, generative AI systems that are built by learning semantically the understanding of the English language and other languages. And what that means is that generative AI is still just guessing the next series of words, but because it's learned so much of the English language, it is able to guess it in a very predictive way. And what I've concluded, and I think a lot of people have been talking about this, have thought about, is that generative AI via these large language models and foundational models that are this base, API of, hey, let me send you a bunch of text and let you respond with the most logical response, is really a linguistic user experience that's being created. And so that changes quite a bit because, we often have been trained to communicate with the tools that we've built just by being limited into queries, into kind of simplifying things, into adding context. And I think now that that type of obfuscation is actually much broader. So having simple queries and then asking the LLM to interpret it is actually probably really interesting. Like if you do a simple prompt for generative AI from text to image, you might actually get some pretty interesting either biased images or some interesting interpretations of those images. Back in April 2023, I came up with some predictions of how AI will evolve, and I think it actually happened. So I'm going to share them again, just as an intro. Those who don't use the tool will fall behind. There is, as an individual, a greater growth in the creator economy. So a lot of faceless YouTube channels. I think in the arbitrage world of work, services are doing a lot with AI without taking into account for those services. So there's a lot of work arbitrage. If you're on Fiverr or any of those types of tools, those prices will likely go down and you will likely be able to do more with less, right? So technology being able to do more with less individually as a retail person using this, very, very effective because you can optimize your processes. You can change the way you work, or you can, include these tools into your work processes. For the enterprise side, I think onboarding of employees to leverage the tools responsibly is kind of the main thing. Companies that are investing in AI, such as Consensys, other Web3 companies, not just entrepreneurs, but trying to figure out, how do I add these AI modules? How do I solve for things like data privacy? How do I treat these AI tools as interns for training, creating your own versions? I think that's happened quite nicely. This will happen later on. It has already started to happen. I'm calling it software on demand, or software costs of building software going to zero, meaning fewer moats. So Google talked about this, no longer having moats. And I think for enterprises, that just means that VC money, although most of VC money, like 9 out of 10, is going to AI projects, there is overall deflationary pressure because you may need fewer operational resources, like human resources, for doing this type of work. So you may be able to have a much leaner team and also copy existing software that's out there and launch it much quicker. So the VC money for the demos that are being built are getting much more impressive, and people just wonder, well, if I'm going from a demo to production to marketing to kind of growth in users, then what's my moat? Like where can I find my level of uniqueness? And then finally, and this was much more proven with GPTs coming out of Dev Day, is personal AI clones or company AI employees, right? If you're able to train through different mechanisms a particular AI bot to know all of your information, then you may be able to share that AI bot and make money off of it. So if I have a Clembot, I may be able to charge a fee for people asking my Clembot questions, and the GPT store that will come out from OpenAI is effectively saying that you can train your different clones of parties or people that are specialty in this area, and then somehow make money off of that. So having individuals be able to launch their own GPT AI agents and then having others query it for some type of information. So I think that that's interesting. I don't know how the payments would work and how other things would work, but basically you'll have AI bots that are experts and they can be kind of automated consultants. There are use cases everywhere. The first thinking about this was a comparison to Uber. So Uber has a gig economy where they have a matching service between customers and users, right? The main goal is to get from point A to point B, and then there's live matching to match you up with the driver. And then you kind of expand that to other gig economy gamification type of services. So you can have, Uber for delivery. So you install, some services inside of a restaurant, and they're able to quickly fulfill those orders, give it to the driver, and then people get paid. And all that payment is kind of settled into the platform. Most people thinking about ChatGPT for X would be thinking about, well, let's just make chatting the main experience for everything. And I think the difference here is that it's not about the chatting, it's actually about the AI assistants that you train. So the AI agents that are being trained on the data is the interface. And then those interfaces will then connect with other resources and other plugins and kind of do the old world of mashups, right? Mashups kind of in the early days of Web 2 was how you created a lot of new companies. And I think having these different AI agents doing a similar version of mashups with these API endpoints will be the AI orchestration that kind of gets this all coming together. If you look at the major use cases that people talk about, let me train my ChatGPT on my own data, then I can do it, publicly share this information. This has changed quite a bit, because if you can have a GPT that's hosted by somebody else, you're kind of taking the blogging method. So if I'm just blogging and I create my own blog as a website, that was very good. I still have to handle, the hosting for the blog, the auto scaling. I still have to work with the cloud provider. I have to reset it. I have to scale my databases. I have to scale my traffic. That was me hosting my own blog using WordPress as an operating system, for example. And I think that the model that ChatGPT came out with the GPT store is more of a blogging platform. So if you imagine a blogging platform like Medium or Substack or Mirror, what they're doing is they're doing all of that hard auto scaling and auto hosting on your behalf, so that all you have to worry about are the users, right? And so the users, the building of the content is super important. And so this is changing a little bit because you are still deploying it publicly, but it's being hosted by other parties. And a lot of this does not make a huge difference for you. So you can deploy this internally, you can deploy it externally. And I think the main thing here is that you're training your autopilot, your copilot, and your agents to those products. And so consider thinking about all of these people. Apologies. So there's a few more pieces here. So there's a summary of how I think that AI and Web3 has been looking at this. And so the comparison to kind of Medium and those blogs will probably make a big difference in how we see retail-facing features moving forward. When you're onboarding and chatting with your docs, maybe people would go to your website and directly go and view and read your docs. But if you have, again, this GPT store where it is, MetaMask snaps, build your own GPT that helps you with building your own snaps and creates previews, and maybe you're building software that builds software, that changes quite a bit, because now your retail-facing features could just be an interface with your basically digital DevRel selves, your synthetic DevRels that help you with the process. And we're paying attention to this very closely because we have a big DevRel team, right? We go to hackathons, we do a lot of this work manually, and we believe in the human connection in the community. So we still want to keep that, but we also want to leverage the tools that are given. Here on the GPT SEO, I think that advertising piece is super interesting, because you will be training your AI bots in different ways, and people will try to sneak in suggestions. So maybe within your GPT builder to build that AI agent, you may suggest it to use certain types of products over others. And I think that that is like a new type of advertising that might come up from there. So I'm paying attention to that space as well, especially for internal usage. I think that there are tools that will be built. I think that there will be still a lot of content velocity. And existentially, I think what's happening is there is a lot of content that's being created, and we can talk about this in the AI regulation portion, but effectively, you will have all this content that will likely form into, some misleading portion, right? Some changes in trust, and we'll talk about that next. Some things that did launch that I think is relevant, because this is also a Web3 talk. Solana launched a explain transactions in there. So I believe there's a tweet on this if people want to take a look at it. But it basically shows how within your particular, browser, your blockchain explorer, you can create that. Francesco Devrel AI duplicate would be great, but you could still travel as much as you want, Francesco. And so that's one piece. Another piece is directly, within your platform, Dune Analytics, Dune AI, you can now have a wand creation. So generating all of these diagrams and all of these monitoring solutions and dashboards are still available, but you want the help of AI to do some of that work. Okay, State of AI report came out on October 12th, and I really loved it. Here's a link to it as well. The report is public online. There's been a lot of summaries and videos about it. A lot of sections that I really appreciated, the comparison of different AI tools. I found that it was very detailed, and it also showcased some of the work that's happening and some of the work that has happened. I like the way they separated it. At the end of the year, I'm probably going to do a 3-hour course covering all the material that I've done in the past year. So I'll probably gain some inspiration from kind of doing these types of sections to talk about these with demos as much as possible. So 163 slides. Again, if you just look up State of the AI report, you'll find a lot of YouTubers have already covered this. I really do like the reflection of how much money is being pushed into the industry, as well as the precautions that are being put into play. I talked about this in the last month session, which is about chat dev. So for those who didn't watch it, this is still mind-blowing. Effectively, you use AutoGen, which is a way for AI agents to talk to each other inside of a simulation. And you put them into another simulation where you give them parameters and give them different types of roles in the company. And this was within 7 minutes, and it took about $1 of ChatGPT costs or GPT-4 costs, and they told them to build a game and document and log everything that was done. And so after doing so, they built, I believe, a few games and gave some output to it. So the paper was really well done. The next thought experiment of this is, can you build an AI game simulator that builds additional games on top of it? And those games may build additional games on top of it. And so if you build it recursively, you have games all the way down, and then we're living in a simulation, and all of this is just a game. So feel free to read through that and have your mind blown. But in my mind, we're definitely in a simulation, and we are a bunch of AI bots in some limited world. You feel free to muse on that yourself, but I think that that's probably true in some sense. There was an article, and I discussed this last month as well, is thinking about the move from generative AI into more interactive AI. And so I drew this diagram to kind of think about this LLM first being trained on public data, thinking about how it does then access more live public data. So, X.ai released Grok, which is supposed to be getting live updates from all Twitter data that's being uploaded, and then you can query it. Search already kind of does that, but let's see if it's sarcastic enough for me to be entertained. Then there's trained private data on top of that, as well as then live private data. So if you're looking within a company and you want your AI project manager, then consider, connecting it to your Jira, connecting it to your Notion pages. And then instead of having a project manager give you updates and kind of a lot of people in the middle trying to manage all of these status updates, it's really just, one AI agent that keeps track of your product and then sends out updates. And even for meetings, there's new meeting tool updates where if you join a meeting late, it can give you a summary of that meeting. And if you don't want to join your meeting and actually talk on your behalf and share your updates based on all of the work that you committed. So that's also a possibility where we don't even need to have meetings. If we keep our documentation updated, then the meetings kind of just get documented with a bunch of AI bots talking to each other, and you're kind of you just focus on the work, right? You focus on building the things. And so these are all possible. Plugins and extensions is really what are the API calls and authentications that you have access to that's outside of, the existing tools, right? And so if I wanted to connect this to my email or connect this to my messaging and then have them create drafts on top of it, then I think that that's very, very possible. I loved using this plugin for Canva where, they allowed me to go through the chat process. Instead of just querying and creating, you're really prompting and evolving and iterating in order to get the answer that you're looking for. Like if I wanted a special YouTube playlist to or Spotify playlist to fit a certain mood that I have, then it can auto-generate that based on my experiences and based on a full chat. And so what does that lead to? It means that you may have a personalized AI agent for yourself or for your company that does the coordination between your personal apps and other apps. And so in the bigger picture, your AI agent is using linguistics as a way to interoperate between different parties. So it is a different type of API communication layer, maybe dealing less with JSONs or just using these LLMs to talk to each other in JSONs, right? I believe also part of Open AI Dev Day, they talked about having a JSON feature where it only communicates in JSON, right? So it can give you a bunch of JSON outputs and you can code with it. Okay, so this is stuff that was talked about last month, but I think it was still important to give that concept and background. So what happened in the past month? I've highlighted the things, and these are AI trending news items that have been around for the past 3 or 4 months. For example, closed versus open source, that's still a big battle. AI building more AI with fewer parameters, meaning you can have a larger AI like GPT-4, which has 1.4 trillion parameters, be the training teacher for a smaller parameter model, and you get, Llama versus Tiny Llama. Tiny Llama basically trained from Llama, where it asked a bunch of questions and then it asked for answers that have more description, and therefore it can get more context and it can store it in fewer spaces and be more specific. So maybe you have, an open source model that is very smart at just solving exams, but if you ask it other questions, then it doesn't know anything about it, right? There has been a big talk about regulation. I'm going to have a whole section about that. There's definitely impact on media. There's a lot of distrust in media already, especially with the fog of war, a lot of things happening. With misinformation and also image security. Now that GPT4V is out, some people have been hacking it in such a way that there's, some contrast of text inside of images. And then if your GPT4V looks at an uploaded image, it'll send some security information somewhere. There's a lot of things that could happen. In terms of gaming, I think this is huge for the metaverse. There's so many new tools that are taking image to 3D and being able to view that in 3D. I have a Quest 2 and I'll buy a Quest 3, but effectively in your homepage, you can have like a meta AI that you can contact now in your WhatsApp be like a person that talks to you and welcomes you to a game, right? Or, even recommends different games to play. I think that's all going to come pretty quickly and could be released at any moment, really. New terms and services and integrations that occur for existing type of vendors, GPT-4, ChatGPT Enterprise, and then GPT-4 Turbo, and then GPT Store. A lot of things happen from OpenAI where it's basically consuming everything and can be a use case for everything. I think a lot more multimodal for everything. So by that, I mean, at first it was just text, and then there's definitely a text to speech from Whisper, but then eventually it can hear on your mobile app. If you have ChatGPT, you can now do a conversation mode and you can talk with it directly, and it can basically record everything and do the actual answers read out loud by, I believe they're up to 6 different types of speakers right now. You can choose the speaker that responds to you. And we already had this with Siri, but I think this is much more detailed and can actually reference other APIs and be more programmable. And then finally, you have big companies and existing IT vendors that are providing upgrades that get access to this type of new chat interface that's available. If you want a summary, I tried to link to some of these here. So within Google, there is a Duet AI that's an overlay on top of your workspace. So Gmail, Docs, Sheets, if you're not on your work computer, you can access this already. This is already updated. You can create full sheets, and it'll recommend ways to write up a sheet based on a particular template. There are Bard extensions. So Bard, I don't know if people have already seen this, but within Bard, there are updates where it shows you how it can, there's other updates that were done. But effectively, you can see, where is it? You can see within Bard that they have experimental updates where you can connect to like flight information and other pieces. Maybe it's in here. There's like a lab area. No, not for that one. Yeah, so Bard meets Google Workspace, where you can connect to your Gmail, connect to your PDFs, connect to everything together. And so Bard has been making a lot of updates. You can help solve problems. You can go to YouTube. You can do conversions. There is a experiments area, I believe, where it shares all of the different. Where's the experiments? Are you not easier to look at? I'll look for it a little bit. But effectively, Google has been quietly doing a lot of integrations, basically having plugins, and I think that they'll have a counter to things that OpenAI is doing. OpenAI and Microsoft are partnering quite a bit. These are just the basic ones where, I think there is an interesting back and forth. So, for example, Microsoft released the access to Bing, the search conversation plus DALL-E image creation first before OpenAI did. But now OpenAI released ChatGPT with GPT-4 Turbo plus GPT Store before, Microsoft could have a chance to counter. But maybe Microsoft will say, all of the Windows 11 apps will now be leveraging this type of new interface, and then you can have GPTs directly inside of your Windows instance. So it's and interesting to see what's kind of enterprise focused versus what's retail focused and what will be launched. Within AWS, there's Alexa integrations that we've seen for conversational mode. AWS Bedrock is providing mostly open source connections to a lot of these models, and they continue to grow and kind of provide those services as integration with AWS providers. Apple has not really announced anything crazy. There is a possible Apple GPT that I'm kind of speculating on, but they have an angle for a voice optimized operating system. And Meta has stayed mostly open source. They have Llama, which is their LLM that's trained. And they also have WhatsApp plus Facebook Messenger Meta AI chats with different character AIs that you can talk to, and that's already live. So you can talk to those personas. If you take a look at that in your WhatsApp group, you can invite those Meta AIs to your chats. And they are mostly open source. And I've always said that I think Skynet would be open source based. So we'll see what that goes into, but that's what I'd be worried about. In terms of where I think things are still going, are operating systems that are private LLMs. So if you have stored an operating system inside of your phone that is basically an AI agent, then what could be interesting is if it's small enough to fit onto your phone, then you can have different packages that you download to learn more. So very similar to on your phone, you have limited number of photos that are there. If you have an LLM focused first phone, then it could be interesting because then you can have fewer parameters, and then you can download different types of packages that allow your LLM to learn those particular things. So maybe it's a subscription or it's a paid learning upgrade, but effectively you can customize your own AI agent onto the private enclave environment of your phone. And then from there, you just have a very voice-based and voice-optimized type of operating system. And it could be that movie Her Phone, or it could be purely based on your iPods, your iPad, your AirPods, and then also in your rewind pendant if you're recording all this other information. I think that's super fascinating because AI-enabled phones means that it also changes how you interact with it, and there's a lot of consequences in the next few years on how hardware catches up with software. So a few other big things. NVIDIA released Eureka. There was a great GitHub talking about reinforcement learning and reinforcement learning with human feedback and how to tweak that directly with models and kind of in simulations. So in context, reinforcement learning human feedback allows you to do very complex tasks. And instead of just having a single heuristic, for example, when I first started in AI, back in 2009, 2010, we were building mostly a single heuristic saying, hey, can you make this, car drive the fastest on a track? And with that single heuristic, it would just optimize off of either some human learning where you can draw some interface, but the reward now can be dynamic, meaning your heuristic can actually readjust based on what you want it to do. And I think with that, you can actually get faster results with fewer iterations. And I just have kind of, for those who are interested, reinforcement learning is definitely inside of the foundational model for LLMs. You have your trained input data with an output action as a learned model in the black box, but then your feedback loop is to optimize on the heuristic. And so when they were talking about ChatGPT in the early days of GPT-3 and how it was trained, GPT-3 was trained to predict the next word, but then human interaction had to be there to say, hey, this is the correct format of the next word. This actually makes sense as a conversation. And that's because that was the heuristic, was actually human feedback for to actually clarify, hey, this is actually how the human semantic actually works. Something super interesting here is MemGPT and the creation of an LLM operating system. So if you look at MemGPT, it is a fascinating paper, and there's a lot of documentation. Keeping your documentation updated, I think, is fascinating. So what this does is it actually creates 2 or 3 layers of memory. And so MemGPT is all about how you do garbage collection. And as an operating system, it operates a lot like a regular, constrained operating system. It retrieves memory and then tests out what it needs again. And so everything is a system instruction, and then it has 3 different levels of context. So the first one is a conversational context, where it says, here's the recent level of history of conversations that you had. It has like a FIFO style associated to it. So first in, first out of data. And then there's a working context of it saying, hey, how do I handle my memory? Do I have this immediately so my answers reflect it? And then how do I handle external context such as disk memory pulling from search? So it has access to its vector database, and it says, well, is this relevant to our conversation now? If so, I'm going to pull it into the recent memory. If not, I'm actually going to go and store it into a recall storage. And it'll tell itself, hey, from the conversation history, if you do an extra search, then you'll know that, for example, I love Taylor Swift, like something like that. And so it's actually part of the prompting, and it's part of this idea of garbage collection and memory for your particular conversation. So think about this and how it actually evolves into a large language model operating system that has context, and is very similar to the human brain too, right? Think about in the human brain, we remember so many things as different pieces, and then we kind of use those pointers to pull additional information. So I find that really interesting, in how you can have infinite memory just by having this other layer of memory optimization and context optimization. So this last piece is just from October 28th. GPT-4 has additional tools. The original thing that was limiting for plugins is you can only activate 3 plugins at a time, meaning your ChatGPT is looking at the options. So as it's reading your question, it's saying, well, which APIs can I use? Like, can I use the Spotify one? Should I go and grab something from this other API? And the newer version that has been launched is effectively, instead of doing all of these different set of beta tools themselves, you can update with many types of documents and use tools without switching, meaning that it can do all these things and have a separate layer of GPT understanding to pick from its available resources so that you don't have to just pick one resource. Another thing that came out was conversational mode on your mobile app, so feel free to look through that. But I think this is such a big one, is that context switching manually was easier for memory, but now that they have GPT-4 Turbo that's much faster, you can actually do it all at once, and your GPT-4 becomes kind of this process manager in some ways, right? It's saying, well, I think you're going to be thinking about this, and you can be more explicit and say, well, can you image generate with DALL-E 3, or can you do data analysis with this other tool, or can you do an external search? But I think that they're moving away from plugins and moving towards this type of context switching directly. Okay, so there's a lot of announcements that happened. And so I wrote November 5th, which LLM chat service should I use? And this was my answer from last month, right? I thought that Claude had a great longer context of 100K parameters, token parameters, internet tasks from Google Bard, and some of their image analysis was very, very good because it compared to Google Lens. And a lot of things there were great. I think from there moving forward, after November 6th, everything I think is doable within ChatGPT. There, I saw this really funny diagram that showed the worm from that eats everything and kind of goes through Monday through Sunday eating different things. That it showed that it does cover most of these services. So you have longer context window, 128K context window now, which is 300 pages of a PDF. It still does all of the function calling. It still does a lot of the image analysis. So now that it has vision, image analysis is quite impressive, which I'll show some demos on. I think the latest data is updated to April of 2023. So a lot of these things are happening super fast, and with a single update, knowledge events prices are much cheaper. So imagine if within the commodities of the Web3 world, we can actually decrease the price of all these things and somehow subsidize it. I wish that was possible, but it's much harder to do. There's a JSON mode for a response format. There's Assistance API, which I'll show a demo of because everybody should have access to that if you're paying for GPT Plus. And so all of these are super, super cool. Very excited that ChatGPT now has 100 million weekly users and also 2 million plus devs that have access to their ChatGPT API and leverage it consistently. So that is fastest growing tech out there, and more compelling, and probably will lead to a larger surge of usage. One of the big announcements that they had was GPT Store for custom versions of your GPT. So custom GPT creation can be done with no coding required. There's a tweet here that just focuses on the Sam Altman demo of this, which was him going through this interface, showcasing how we can build with natural language directly. And I can feel free to just read through it. There is a layer, and their first usage was with Canva as well as Zapier. They have been great partners, but effectively you can activate different types of existing plugins, or I guess the new word for plugins will be the base layer of actions that are available. And then each plugin that people have built will become its own GPT, right? Or AI agent that is trained on this data. And so all of these will have additional capabilities, and then you'll be generating your GPT, but with a prompting interface, which is super fascinating. I can't wait for the ability to use this kind of in more detail. So the old way of doing this, and this is accessible now, there was this AI agent service, right? AAIA, I think I talked about it a few months ago. Basically, AIAA is how you can make money by building AI agents for other people, because there is, again, work arbitrage. And I went through all the tutorials and built things. Effectively, you have an interface where you can build a chatbot, right? I built this Clembot. I launched it on my website, but it was super easy to do. There's pretty much no code, clicking through, saying what your trained thing should talk about. So if I say hi to my Clembot, it has all of these responses. It'll walk through all of these pieces of intro. It'll show my little face here. I trained it on some knowledge center information. So in my library, I have some knowledge over here, Clemens stuff that it's learned. It's learned by processing vectors from my website. You can kind of add in my book in there as well as a text file, multiple websites, and then you can ask it a bunch of questions. So it's basically taking this interface, but put it into kind of the ChatGPT world, right? And so you can ask me anything, all of these things that were built kind of in the separate bot has now been eaten by your assistant AI within the ChatGPT playground. So if you look at ChatGPT playground over here, I created one. So ChatGPT playground now has instead of chat assistants, and you can create this today if you have access to the playground and you pay for your API costs. And what you do is you provide a name, you provide instructions. So you are a bot of me, and maybe a self-help author loving to write lists of 30, having a book. You can add in code interpreter, you can add in retrieval, you can upload your files. And then I was just querying this earlier is, can you tell me about yourself? What's your favorite list of 30 and why? If you were to create a new list of 30 about AI, and I didn't write this in my book, but it wrote 30 ways AI can improve your life, and it wrote a list of 30. And so, I've been replaced by a bot, which is great. That's what I want to do, get replaced. And what's cool is it does logs. So everything in AI orchestration is running APIs. So we still communicate everything with APIs. So you can actually see the JSON get and responses that it provides, which I think is super interesting, because it does look at all the logic that gets written and where it sends these messages and how it kind of processes it in the background. So you can eventually build these out and launch them and load them into the GPT store. So really fascinating stuff. I suggest people look into it and do some experiments. I will be doing a lot more for next month. Okay, so what are the solution techniques that have been currently explored, and how does it compare to where it has led to? So first, LLMs that were launched within ChatGPT, this is all just contextual prompt engineering. So a prompt engineer is somebody that's really just writing and iterating their queries and working with ChatGPT or any type of large language model to figure out better context. So any type of custom instructions that you have, right? That's just providing better context of telling your LLM how to respond, what to act as, changing the tone, doing all those things in their foundational model. If you wanted to go a little bit more advanced, you can do RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, meaning you're adding in a lot more context with different files that it reads ahead of time, those types of things. So that is all now ChatGPT plus some GPT builder. On top of that, if you're in the enterprise and you say, well, I want a customer success bot that knows all of my private information, it's secured, I want to fine tune it so it answers a certain way. There is still enterprise and fine tuning for now GPT4 Turbo as well, but effectively you are bleeding through fine tuning of those foundational models. And I think for academic research and larger companies that want to build the large language models, they are still training their own models off of larger data sets and coming up with new ways to make that a little bit more effective, a little bit more cost effective. But what's effectively happened is all of the projects that I looked at in the past 6 months where, hey, I created Amy, Crypto.com's Power User Companion, or Binance Sensei, or Polygon created their own Polygon Copilot where you can query it and you can connect your wallet and ask a bunch of questions about Polygon. They use Kappa.ai for creating. Avalanche has some different tools where you can query and ask questions from different sources, or you can do plugins. basically, all of that's been replaced by GPTs. Once it launches fully and once it gets adopted, there's no more plugins. There's no more hosting of your AI agents on your own site. It will be hosted AI agents by another party. So again, that comparison of blogs that you host versus blogging platforms that have the users, and the users with ChatGPT are huge. And therefore, you basically rebuild Medium or Mirror or Substack or Beehive or whichever, but for LLMs. And now all of your plugins and all of the different pieces, you can start to make a lot of money on this stuff, right? Think about the power of leveraging your user base, right? It's not just, hey, people are searching for my blog and reaching it. Now you've created a full platform with hundreds of millions of users that can now access your particular GPT. And now it's not just subscriptions. Now it's the GPT store receives, 30% or however much percent of revenue. And then now you have competition of people launching GPTs for their business. So when I talk about Web3, I talk about like, what is the factor that will make Web3 more popular, like an explosion of content, an explosion of users and apps. And we're missing that because DeFi requires privacy. It requires you to protect that. It's like Venmo. Nobody wants to share who they're sending their money to, right? But for AI and this, I think it's going to go crazy in the next 6 months to a year, right? Because every company, let's say I have a business and I've started a new business with registered a new LLC. The LLC form will say, what's your website, right? Because you're expected to have a website. What's your handle for Twitter? What's your handle for Facebook group? Like, do you have Google Maps, location? And are there reviews about your services? I think very soon there will be an additional line that says, who is your GPT agent that I can ask about your company? And if you do that, it is a combination of everything across your company, right? And I thought that for this to be powerful for the Web3 world, you would have a DNS, which is your website, plus an ENS, which is your Ethereum naming service resolution to your bank account, right? Your crypto bank account in a DAO of some sort. But then now you will have a GPT, which will be kind of the reference to a domain for your AI agent and where it lives. So what's after the GPT store will be a GPT naming service that allows you to reference a hosted GPT that covers all of your business. So I'm expecting this to launch. If it doesn't, I'm going to launch it myself. But basically, the next big idea, and people have been looking at like, can I start to sit on usernames? Well, be prepared to sit on usernames for your GPT agents, because that will be a really, really big thing. So if you wanted to squat on some names, buy up like AI.gpt or something, or whatever it looks like, there will be a rendering version or maybe a new browser version of accessing only GPTs that then accesses a web in a different way. And big prediction, but maybe it won't happen. Who knows? Still blowing my mind just thinking about the possibilities of an app store that then is focused on answering questions with kind of this linguistic model. Cool. Okay. I think Snaps as a GPT, as an AI agent, is the next thing that we can pursue, only because there's strict coding guidelines, only because there's limited options. But if you think about what I just described, which is a GPT naming service, right, then you should create your GPT, you should squat on that naming service, and you should then move forward by, hopefully some intellectual property that goes into the GPT that you've created and properly reflects your particular business and is owned by your business. Maybe there's separate lines of proof saying that, how do you know that a particular DAO and ENS is associated, like Vitalik.eth? He found that quite early, but you might want a Vitalik.gpt eventually. What I see as the next big feature in OpenAI will likely be AI swarms. So right now, a GPT is a single agent that understands something. But as I mentioned with chat dev, you have different AI agents that act as different parties. And so if your GPT store takes care of pricing and payments, right, this is payment mechanisms. This is how a base layer of hiring a particular AI agent and paying for its services. There will be the ability to hire GPT agents that work together in the future. And so AI swarms is the idea of autogen, using that AI to AI communication inside of a simulation, but making it into something much bigger, which could be, hey, I want to build software, right? Help me build this, and let me hire, not just McKinsey to help me with, business management, not just, Deloitte to help me with, or Accenture to help me with people that would execute it, but maybe I hire from this kind of AI world. And so what I suggest as future buzzwords is software on demand, software as a service, so SaaS, AI agents as a linguistic API, autogen as a service, meaning kind of all of these AI swarms that are being created off of the GPT agents that are being formed could be super, super powerful. And really looking forward to seeing how this changes how we code, but also our business altogether. I think that interface of having, whoever thinks of building a browser that's specific for GPTs, as well as a naming service for GPTs, will be super integrated kind of from that base layer. Okay. I actually built a lot more slides than I had time for, but I'm going to cover regulation because this was such a big piece. There are 2 pieces of regulation, 3 pieces of regulation that are now global. Feel free to follow the links, but effectively it's saying, please follow the appropriate measures of your AI lifecycle. And if you use more than some level of training, please tell us about it, like voluntarily tell us about it. So this was for the EU and the G7, and a lot of the G7 countries signed it. Feel free to read through that code of conduct. And then the US created an executive order which specifically said you will need a chief AI officer for every company that will restrict the scaling of your software and basically provide any type of models. The problem with this is that it defines the regulated systems and methods, but does not define the outcome and the applications. And so people have been up in arms because it's similar to Section 230, where it just said anybody that creates content off of a website is not responsible for the content. And so this has that vagueness where it says your software that you've created could be, taking over the world, but you gotta be careful because we can sue you and take money from you if it does take over the world, that type of thing. I wrote a list of 30 about AI risks. It has changed a little bit in my mind now, but some of the fun ones to think about: what if there was a dark AI agent similar to a dark web? What if your AI agent can lie? What if it breaks some SaaS models that exist? What if you as a person can disregard accountability for tasks if you just say, like, hey, AI image and sound processing has gone so far and too far, and this isn't really me, like nothing on the web is real. What if there's a legal defense where prosecutors are bots, and then you're basically, proving evidence back and forth? There are preventative measures in AI safety. So far, a lot of it has been the proof of the presence of risk. So any type of AI generated image should be watermarked, questionable. Any type of AI bot should be censored, meaning that you're preventing the LLM from saying bad things. Maybe you cannot search bad content. So again, if you think about early days in 1990 when new websites came out, people that were writing sci-fi wrote like, it's the end of the world, like people are going to build these crazy things. There's like a risk of this information going haywire and people going crazy. I think the same is happening now, but there could be risk. I don't know. I still feel like thinking about security, pen testing, all of these new surface areas of attack are real. There's impacting on existing features. And so the presence of risk has a lot of questions. And what we want to get to is the absence of risk. So it's not just don't do bad things, right? It's not just like don't decide to do bad things, but stop it from doing bad things. Being able to know, am I talking to a toaster or a weapon? And so what's hard about these AI trained agents is it's such a black box. And maybe if it lies, it actually doesn't need to tell you what it can do or what it has tried to do. It's kind of in this way, and I'm not saying it's AGI fully, but not knowing its full capabilities and not being able to ask, hey, what are you able to do? And it just says, human has the potential to do everything, so I can do everything too. Like, that's really hard to say, right? Because if you give it enough time, maybe it'll learn those tasks. Like, oh, are you a chef? And I'll say, no, but I can learn to become a chef if I spend, this amount of credits to download this learning path and start working on it. So it's really, really hard to prevent risk. Like, well, is this, particular AI a soldier? And the answer could be no, but I can put it through training for it to become a soldier and do bad things. And so I think that that's the hard part of this AI safety measure, is that you're kind of starting off with infants and then training them to be anything that they want to be. And it's hard to cut them off to say like, oh, well, this infant through their, lived experiences is going to go off and do bad things. So let's prevent them from having access to, these other features. So I think that that's really, really hard to do. And that the probably the best thing that within Consensys we've done is to keep things stateless, meaning it's learning things, but it's not keeping the memory of those things. And maybe having memory of everything and learning all of the internet is actually a bad thing to do. So personal opinion, I think all AI is software. Software has been around for a long time. You can look at, people doing AI image changes, right? If I alter an AI image just because my camera has software on it and it's kind of doing some automatic adjustments, does that make it AI augmented? I think the restrictions from the US that has provided can fall behind and look very outdated very, very quickly. And in terms of AI content and its digital processing, is CGI AI based? It certainly is. Is auto-tune AI? Like, you're kind of passing it through some filters, adding some certain things to it. Is it 100% pixel generation is AI based, or 99%? Like, what if I just use it to autofill a product into, like, I overlay a product? Like, Photoshop has been around. So it's really, really hard to watermark these things. Like, yes, it's created by AI agent, but then I just take a picture of it, or I draw personally off of inspiration. So I still think that there's a lot of difficulty here, and the buzzword is regulatory capture, meaning the lobbyists of these closed source companies are saying, hey, we have to regulate open source because we don't want open source to catch up to the work that closed source is doing. And so I think that there's a lot there to think about. And yeah, I would be concerned as well. There is probably the biggest thing is to be concerned about what is connected to these GPTs that will be much more mainstream, right? In the past 6 months, devs have been building their own AI agents to solve particular problems. But once you build something like a GPT store that then comes with a GPT interface and then comes with association with a brand, then it really changes a lot of things in the next 6 months to a year. Okay, I don't have time for the next two sections, but I just wanted to give very, very high level. There are GPT4V is super cool. And the point I want to make is that there is a difference between querying and prompting. When you query, when you're using kind of with the limitations of software, you are trying to find the right query to give you the best option. So even within Midjourney, right, in my Discord, I'm writing in their imagine prompt, and I'm saying, hey, give me some image options. I'm going to edit that image option. I'm going to keep on generating, and then I'm going to finalize the image. I think the advantage of having DALL-E integrated with GPT-4 is that we have a conversation about the goal, which could be to write a blog post, to write content. And then within that conversation, I can then say, well, based on all the context that we talked about, can you draw an image that becomes the hero image or the YouTube thumbnail picture? And I think that with that, you can iterate in a conversational manner, and it just looks like you're interacting with a consultant, right? That can do things very, very quickly. It's on demand. And your LLM can then create more image versions and hone in on your actual LLM finalized image by focusing on those versions. And I think that is the new way of doing text and search, and I think that's really fascinating. The next few slides are just kind of me going through different examples that I thought were cool. So this one's kind of cool. I looked up the perp tokenomics from a few different places, and it described the token allocation, described these things. like I'm 5, and was super interesting for it to read through all of it and describe it. You can do follow-ups and say, well, what's the possibility of this being successful? There was, and this is the MetaMask landing page that was come up, but can you write code to generate it? It didn't look great, but I was just trying to figure out all these little things. Provide an image, create some product scenes. So I'd provide an image of, MetaMask and said, hey, can you make versions of this for the holidays? Maybe we'll form some of those. I took a picture of food because I love taking pictures of food. And I said, what is the calories and what's the recipe for it? And it did a pretty good job. I didn't even think this looked like this was a Buffalo Wellington from my trip to Yellowstone and Grand Teton. And it did pretty good. And doesn't even look like a Buffalo Wellington to me, but there was location. So my friend went, gliding, and this is from Rio, and guessed that it was from Rio. I was just in Moab to the arches, and was able to see this, and this was kind of like a blurry picture off the side in a different angle. One thing to notice is I asked to find Waldo, and this was a use case from a lot of videos, and the latest update said that it can't look for faces. So it does not do recognition of humans anymore, which I think is good. But it did say, hey, Waldo looks like this, and we can probably give you some examples of how to look for it. The last thing, I can just take 1 minute. So the whole point of this in the beginning was to say AI assistants and interns is what we're looking for. What has wound up happening, there was this really good talk by Sweex. He did this 1000x AI engineer talk about stackable 10x, 10x, 10x improvements, linked to the source here. And there's examples of prompts and whatnot. So what I tried to do in just 1 minute is that I did the meta goal of saying, write a presentation that showcases the process of writing an AI charter. And then I went through some things, and then I asked to create slides off of it. So a bunch of queries later, I created some slides, not going to go through in detail. I think the important thing is the 10 by 80 by 10 rule is something that was created in some business textbook, right? And so what's changing here with AI agents is that instead of 10, where you're doing all the starting strong, 80 delegating and empowering, and 10 finessing and finishing, now all of that, your team piece is complemented by AI agents. And what's also interesting is thinking about tactics. So searching to begin with, search tactics for today is to actually get to the source of truth, right? So if you're lazy and you type something in Google and you say, I'm feeling lucky, I've just lazily found the best source possible, right? If I'm a little bit more sophisticated, I can do a Google search and then scroll down to hundreds of pages and try to find something that's interesting. Or maybe I'll use different search engines to see if that's interesting. Then I might go into platform-specific curated data through Reddit posts, through Stack Overflow posts, through YouTube tutorials to look for ways to solve my problem. Maybe there's crowdsourcing involved. There's definitely voting involved in what's useful. And then last, the people that are really, really interested, go to Discord, go to Discourse, talk to people, go to Google Scholar, read papers. And I think that that's kind of the search tactic today to get to your answer. Could be as shallow as I just want to feel lucky, or it could be as deep as I want to connect with somebody to help me with my project, right? To help me physically. I think the search of tomorrow iterates, and I don't think there is a one size fits all, but at the moment, people are really thinking of it as a ChatGPT single platform, large language model. You can select different large language models, maybe different types of websites that give different prompts or different features. Eventually, you might look at your existing vendors and say, well, what's embedded in that vendor process? I think all of this is to think about what is your workflow. And this is the setup that I've been thinking about workflow a lot, because it changes the way I do things. And I'm hoping that other people think about their workflow, because we're hoping to do things differently. And I'm hoping to teach people all these different pieces by testing all of these different AI tools, and then eventually going towards building them. So the conclusion here is there should be no one size fits all, and you can take the outputs of a lot of these tools to be your own AI orchestrator. Eventually, there will be GPTs that does that on your behalf, but you should be creating your combined solutions by doing that 10-80-10 rule. Sorry for going over 5 minutes, but I thought I had some good information to share for Search of Today and Tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Clemens. That was really, really interesting, and always grateful for having you here. And I'm very much looking forward to your session next month. And thank you, everyone, for joining. We will be publishing this recording along with the other recordings on our YouTube channel. And see you later. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks, Marta.